Okay, a while back, relatively speaking, last April, March, February, sometime in the last year, I began to get interested in laser cutting and etching, and I started looking around and seeing what I could do and where I could find one, and I was interested in getting something that I could use for modeling. And so I looked around and I found a machine that I liked, and I'll show you more about it in a second. And I bought it for modeling, but I ended up doing a lot of etching of ceramic tiles, and I've got some up here, and I can talk about them later after I finish my main presentation. And I really got addicted to doing that, and I've done a lot, and I've enjoyed doing it. It's a lot of fun. But I still needed to learn how to etch and cut and build a model using this machine, and no X-Acto knife or anything like that, just this machine to do the job. And so what I'm going to do in this clinic is discuss that project. But first, let's review the equipment and the software. All right, we're on the same page here. Now, let's talk about the laser first. I bought a 2 Trees 5.5 watt laser etcher and cutter, and it came with protective glasses because you don't want that laser bouncing into your eye because it is very, very bright. And I bought it on Amazon for 154 bucks. Now that's not a bad deal. I used it for a little bit. I started playing around etching on a piece of plywood I had that fit in under it. And the first thing I noticed is that if you take a hot laser and you pump it into wood, it makes smoke. And so I was letting the smoke out of the plywood, and it was getting all over my office. And I decided quickly that I needed to be able to vent that outside, so I got myself a dust vent and wood. And I got that at Amazon, God bless Amazon sometimes, for $43.19. And you'll see a picture of that in a moment. Well, I also needed, the hood was fine, but if I didn't exhaust the contents of the hood, then it would just get filled with smoke. And ultimately it would leak out into the room. Well, it had vents on the side, it had venting material, but no actual fan or anything. So I went down to Gigaparts and bought 2 exhaust fans for $6.99 a piece. I installed one and vented it out outside the room, which only had to go like a foot or so. And that works very well just for using a PC exhaust fan, but I have a second one and I may put it on the inside to help force the air out. And then I got an air assist pump. I noticed when doing my ceramic tiles that it generated a lot of dust, and I pulled the laser head out and I could see that there was a lot of ceramic dust in the laser head itself. So, I always cleaned it off with canned air, after using it, but I got myself an air assist pump at Amazon for $53.99 that blows air across the work area, and so it keeps the work area clean, number one. Number two, it keeps the laser head clean, and number three, it keeps the laser head cool, which will extend the life of the laser. Now the laser's supposed to run something like 34,000 hours, and I've got maybe 23,000 hours in it already. So it is supposed to last a very, very long time, but I don't want to take any chances in reducing its life. So all in all of my equipment cost me less than 300 bucks, and it put me in business, and I was really tickled with that. The laser plugs into USB, and so you need software to run the laser. Now the interesting thing about the laser is that it runs on G-code, which is the same kind of code that is used in your 3D printers, except it's only 2-dimensional rather than 3-dimensional. which I found very interesting. That's also important when I get down to light burn, and I'll tell you why. The first program I use is Corel Draw and Corel Photo Paint, but mostly Corel Draw. I use Corel Draw because I can get layers, and layers are important in doing the etching, because you don't always just want to do one layer. Now the tiles here are all one layer, so it doesn't matter. It means it's just a flat picture, and I can etch it in one pass. But with cutting, you may need two layers, one to do the etch and one to do the cut. And that's where light burn comes in. Now I paid $60 for light burn, and if you're using a G-code based laser machine, then light burn only costs you $60. If you're using a CO2 or something like that, then the price goes up and it costs you on an annual basis. I hate software that works like that, but I'm lucky. I just paid $60 flat and I was done with it. I use light burn for this project and for some other project because it gives you a much finer control of the laser when you're doing your etching and your cutting. I should have really coated this with dull coat or something, because I've smeared it up handling it so much. But I used light burn to etch Mount Rushmore. And I'll pass it around and you can see how fine the detail is. The other program I use is called Laser Gerbil, or some pronounce it Gerbil. And it's good for general purpose etching, especially because it's free. Now you can cut with it because you can just set the intensity and speed of the laser as it works. And so you can cut with Laser Gerbil, but I use Laser Gerbil for doing things like these tiles, because it's just, I'm not doing anything like cutting or anything on the tile, so that works very well for those. And I've got things, I got things set up with it the way I like it to do a good and clear cut. Now this is the laser itself. The two trees, 5.5 watt laser. Now some people go out and they say, oh, it's advertised as a 40 watt machine with a 5.5 watt laser. Some people go out and they say, oh, it's a 40 watt machine, and they don't read or choose to read or remember the 5.5 watts. So they buy it thinking they're getting a 40 watt laser. And that's because they're idiots and don't read all the stuff that Amazon tells them about it under description. You notice to the right of everything you buy on Amazon, there's the word description, and it tells you all about it and says it's a 5.5 watt laser. Now I had a friend who saw mine and he said, wow, I gotta have one of those. Now he said that about my 3D printers and a lot of other stuff. But he went out and he bought a 10 watt laser. And he does really, really nice stuff with it. But at any rate, that's the laser. It moves in X and Y and not Z. It's about 2 feet on a side. You can raise and lower the laser head itself. Now let's see if this actually works on a color TV. Yeah, right there on the laser, there's a little knob right there that you turn and you slide it up and down in a track. Right here is a little tiny round thing that has steps on the side, and that's the height of the laser that you can set it. Well, that is ridiculous to use. It's so tiny. So I 3D printed a nice gauge so I can set my height easily. It's very quiet. The loudest thing is actually the air pump. If I turn the air pump off, you would just hear as the laser head moves back and forth. The air actually plugs right into the side of it, and so it blows right across what it's doing. And it's a blue laser if you're interested in the color. This is the vent. Now you can't, or the hood. You can't see all of it. You can see, if you look here, I've got a mirror here and I've got a mirror on the other side. I use that for visually aligning the laser head. And you can see my fingerprints on the mirror, so you can see how much dust is generated and blown around by the the air assist. This is a little folding sheet that zips down and comes down, and it is, you don't need glasses to look at the laser through that. So, and I don't wear my glasses much anymore because I pull this down anyway when I do my actual lasing, because I want to vent all the stuff outside. So that's the vent and the hood, and I have the laser attached to the tabletop with heavy double-faced tape, so the laser won't move. And under the laser I have an 18-inch tile that is also attached to the table so it doesn't move. And then I have my a little grill above that, and I should have photographed all of that, that my work area rests on, so that the laser, when it runs, it will get down through the grill.
You can see the very top of it.
Yeah, right there you can see where the grill is, and then my work area is here. I've got a heavy piece of cardstock, and in that I've got two cutouts that I use the laser to cut out, so I can put in these two sizes of tiles, and the rest I work right on top of that whole thing, which you'll see in a minute. Now I use CorelDRAW software, as I said, in order to generate my work. And I work in three colors. I work in black, I work in red, and I work in blue. Now in this particular instance, the black is used for the clapboard siding, which is going to be etched. The red is the building outlines, and so that is going to be cut. And then the blue is just an identifier, as you can see, front, rear, roof, and that, there's in another version, there's left and right there. And so that's how my initial project looked when I was ready to go to work. And then I took this, and the other thing I like about CorelDRAW software is it allows me to export my image into an AutoCAD file. So the layers are preserved. And so then I pull it into Lightburn software, and this is what the Lightburn software interface looks like. And you can see, again, the three colors, the black, the red, and the blue. And the blue will not etch, it will not cut, and I'll tell you why in a second. On the side here, you can see a little window that shows 4 columns, and I'll enlarge that for you. You double click on any one of those and it gives you the same information, but now I can select any one of these layers, and each one of those colored boxes is a layer. And so I can select the layer. In this case we have 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, and 27 are the same. And so I can change the name and do all sorts of neat things with it. I can also turn on the output, so if the output is turned off, the laser won't do anything with that layer. I can set the speed of the laser. In this case it's 80 millimeters per second. And I can set the intensity of the laser, and it is set to 60%. So the maximum it will do on that layer is 60% and no higher, but it will go lower depending on what the software sees in shading. That's how I got those nice shades in that in Mount Rushmore, because as you know, the software knows what to tell the laser to do intensity-wise, but it won't go above that 60%. Now here we have the blue, and you can see here the blue right there, the output is turned off. So it does not output the blue, so there's no etching or cutting or anything like that. And then the red is down here, and it is at 40 millimeters per second and at 100%. And although you can't see it here, it also is set for 5 passes. So it will run the same circuit 5 times when it does the cut to make sure that it cuts all the way through. And you'll actually see that work in a couple of minutes. Now the material I use for my cutting is 1/32 basswood. It's inexpensive. I got a whole box of it. It had 12 sheets in it, and I forget what I paid for it, but it wasn't very much. It cuts well, it etches well, and it works well all the way around. So that's what I use. That's 1/16. I will show you some 1/32 in a few minutes. So I laid everything out, so then I wanted to test it. Now I have a bunch of 16-inch basswood too, so I thought I would do the test etch on that. And do I have that piece here? No, I don't. Okay. Yeah, right here, I do. So I did it on this. I etched the outlines only, as you can see, and I also put my measurements. Now I use Etch doors and windows. So I got out my little digital caliper and I measured as best I could the dimensions for the interior ledges, whatever you want to call them, so that I could get my cuts right so that they would pop right in. And so I did the test etch on this, and I wrote, excuse me, I wrote my dimensions down on there. And when I got the dimensions and I got it all etched out, I looked at it and I said, well, you know, that building is twice as long as it should be. So you will notice that there is a hand-drawn door there and a little mark right there for the new length of the building side when I get to the actual job. So then I did a 1/32 basswood test, and I etched everything, but I did not cut it. But you can see I put in the clapboard here, and in Corel Draw what I did was I put in a 1-column table. And then I adjusted it until I felt that the clapboard width was about right. It's probably a little wide if you get down and measure it, but that's all right. I also shortened the sides of the building, and I shortened the roof sections, and I came up with this. And if you will notice, it is also has the speed and the percentage of laser for the etching and the cutting. I write, every time I do something, I write it down, otherwise I won't remember the next time what it was that I did. So that is the first test, or test 2, of the actual project before I do the cutting itself. So what, yes sir?
There's little warpage in this. Is this from the laser cut, or is there a way to hold it flat?
Well, yeah,
It doesn't matter?
you'll see in a second how it's held flat, but it's probably warped since I did that cut.
Okay.
So then, I did the lathe. Now this is running at 5 times the speed of the actual job, because I wasn't going to sit here and have you watch for 5 minutes to see it work. So the whole job did take about 5 minutes, and you can see right now that it's cutting and etching the siding of the building. And pretty soon you will see it begin to do the cutouts. There we go. And you can see that the air actually blew that window right out of the way. Now here you can see a clamp.
Yeah.
And on the other side, when we get down there, I think you'll see it too. It's clamped down on the other side. And I found that a really, really good clamps to use for stuff like this is hair clips.
Yeah.
Because you kind of bend them and they pop. You can see them right there.
Yeah.
And they hold really, really well. Yes, sir.
Where did you find hair clips? You just don't seem to be the
Publix.
Okay.
Beauty supply store.
I just found the Publix and looked.
The beauty aisle.
And I found them. So there the whole job is done, and you can see you can see that things have definitely been cut out. And if you have been watching the whole time, you would have seen little flashes of blue as it cut through and went down onto the, whatever that is in the back.
Working piece.
So now the whole thing has been cut and it looks like that. Now, what's really nice about this is I picked it up and most of the pieces just fell right out. And those that didn't, I just went, just touched them a little bit and they fell right out. So there is my entire building ready to go. Yes, sir.
How did you said the cut routine is like 5 passes?
Yeah.
Okay, how did you know you needed only 5 or 4 or 6?
Experimenting.
That's what I thought. Okay,
Different 16th inch will take a whole lot more.
I got you.
And also it depends on how high the layer is from the work area. If I make the layer, if I'm just going to do cutting, I can make the head only sit 2 or 3 millimeters from the work area, and so it will be more intense because it loses something even in those little distances. It loses some power.
Actually, by the square of the distance.
Yeah. So at any rate, there we are. My building's all ready to go. At this point, I discovered, I made a little error there somehow. I think that might have been number 27. Remember I had 1 and 27 that were both etched. I think that may have been 27, so it etched twice. And so that's why I have that line in there, but I didn't get too concerned about it. So now it was ready to be painted. I wasn't going to put a building in there on my layout or anywhere without painting it, so I had to experiment with that. I had a concern about warping. We all know about painting wood, especially thin basswood, and then it warps. So I experimented with this cutout piece, and I painted the back with rattle can. Then I painted the front, and you can see with, again, rattle can, and you can see that you cannot see any clapboard there. So that wasn't going to do. So I thought hard and long, well, what am I going to do to get the thing painted and have the clapboard shown? And I came up with the perfect solution. I used pastel chalk. Now, I did not take chalk and just rub it on there. I don't do that. I've been working with pastel chalks for a long time for weathering. I also had pan pastel, but it didn't have yellow. I take a stiff brush with short bristles, and I brush back and forth on the stick itself, and it just powders it. And so then I just simply painted that powder onto all my pieces of my building and got a nice even coloring, and you can see the clapboard really clearly and easily. Yes, sir?
Yeah, do you seal it after you?
Yes. After I did that, I sprayed it with dull coat.
So you're talking about yellow chalk?
Yeah.
Okay, not painted yellow and then put black chalk to accentuate?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's just yellow chalk, and the lines are there. It did not fill them in. Yes, I did put a light spray with dull coat on there. Otherwise, if you touch the building and play with it, you'll get yellow on your fingers. I took my doors and windows and put them on a piece of tape, and then sticky side up, and then I put the tape onto my paint work area, and I just sprayed it with rattle can white. The same white that I use in etching my tiles, as a matter of fact. And because I was very careful with my measurements, measured more than once and cut only once, my doors and windows literally snapped right in. You could hear them snap. I did not touch this thing with an X-Acto knife. It all snapped right into place. As far as the glass in the windows, I had lying right there an old Atlas turnout package with nothing in it anymore, but it had that nice clear plastic. And I use stuff like that a lot for windows rather than doing anything expensive or fancy. So I just cut out a few pieces and put them on, you know, laid them on down and glued them in using canopy glue. I also put a couple drops of canopy glue on all the doors and windows just to make sure that they stay in case there's any expansion or contraction or anything like that. So at this point, I was ready to build it. I was ready to assemble it. And so this is my favorite assembly tool, Legos. I mean, think about it. They're perfectly square and they're infinitely adjustable, height, width. So I laid out, and it was just pure fortuitousness that the building ends fit perfectly in that particular Lego configuration. That was just pure luck there. So at any rate, I built my square, and then I pinned everything down on wax paper on a piece of foam. And then I glued the side in with canopy glue. And then I did the other side over here the same way. And then I popped the whole thing together. And what I like about canopy glue is that it's flexible and it's fast. You know, you get stick right away. And that I like a lot. It's much better than Elmer's for things like this, I think. As far as the roof, I find that suddenly I have a whole box full of M-scale laser cut kits that someone gave me at the last meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went through there looking for roof material that I liked, and I found a set of shingles, but I didn't want to use them in case I actually ever build that particular kit. So what I did was I laid the shingle sheet over my roof. Oh, by the way, I need to go back for a second. My original cut, which you all saw, hold that top one up, Sandy, yeah, that one. The roof pieces are exactly the same length as the sides of the building, so that there was no overhang of my roof. So I went and I cut a new, two new roof pieces that would have a little bit of overhang. And so then I checked the shingle sheet and it was too small, so I scanned it and enlarged it just a little bit, and then I printed it on peel and stick shipping label paper. Well, and there's the only time I actually used an X-Acto knife. I marked out my dimensions for my roof pieces, and then I cut them with an X-Acto knife. I had already constructed the building, so the roof pieces were in place. I took one of these and made it a little higher than the other one. And I took the first piece and I stuck it onto the roof very carefully. And then I took the second piece on the other side, stuck it on very carefully, and it had 1 millimeter of overhang, which I folded over the top of the roof, so I could get a nice, a nice roof line at the top. And in the end, this is what I had. A 2-car garage, laser etched and cut, covered with stick pastel and assembled with canopy glue. And I think it came out looking pretty nice. And I thought, well, if I'm going to show it to these guys, I'm going to make a little diorama for it. So I made a diorama for it, and it's right here. I'm not going to pass that around because it's kind of fragile. But the lessons I learned from this whole thing were measure carefully. I had to do the roof cuts because I measured properly, but I didn't think properly. So maybe another lesson learned is think properly, plan ahead, as they say. Do test etches and cuts. Basswood is inexpensive. I could do this and test it and say, oh, well, that's not quite right, so I could do the other side. Waste not, want not. So I did test etches, and I even do test 3D builds with my 3D printer. And I learned not to be afraid to do something over if I had to until I got it right. I had a tremendous amount of fun building this thing, thinking through how to do it and using the laser etcher and cutter to get what I wanted, and that's what I got. Now if you look very carefully, you'll see that the lawn needs mowing. So I thank you for your time, and I will be glad to answer any questions you might have. Yes, sir.
I've also worked with basswood since the 1950s, okay? And what I do with it is I will, back then we didn't have dull coat, but we had something called sanding seal.
Yeah.
And it was a butyl acetate. If you guys are old enough, you remember a paint called 410M, okay? It's an old brand of paint. But what I do now is I dull coat the basswood before I even use it. Both sides, okay? And then I press it using parchment paper for baking. Fold it, put it in between there, right? And you set the encyclopedia on it, right? Then it's all prepared. It won't absorb any moisture.
Yeah, I've thought about doing that, and one of these days I'll just do a test etch to see what happens if I cut it with dull coat first. Now, this one, if you look, you'll see that it's bent. I painted the grass area green, and of course it immediately warped as that dried. So I set it upside down on my wax paper and put a brick on top of it overnight. Came out nice and flat the next day. I said, great. So then I went and I put a mixture of water and glue, about 50-50, on there so I could put on my static grass, and of course it worked again right away.
You have to paint both sides.
Yeah, I guess.
Counteract the working.
Question, what did you use? It looked like masonite. Was that your base for setting your basswood on?
For etching?
Yeah.
No, it was, I got a bunch of these, 18 by 24, no, 12 by 18 sheets of heavy cardstock. It's probably,
So it was just the same color?
yeah, it's probably at least a 32nd, maybe a 16th. At Hobby Lobby, they're like 98 cents a piece or something. And I use that as the base because, well, I've got one that I've cut. It's been there, and I use it a lot for cutting these tiles. And I'll talk about these for just a minute. This is the standard 4 1/4 inch ceramic tile. I bought a case of them at the Home Depot for $13 and change, 100 pieces. So it's going to take me a while to use them. What I do to etch these, and I've got three kinds here. Let me hold up this one. There are two things I want to accomplish when I etch these tiles. One is to get a black image on it, and one is to get a white image on it, and then a third one is to get a colored image on it. Now, how do you use a laser to get color? I'll tell you how. First of all, to do the white one, I take the tile and I spray 2 or 3 layers of titanium dioxide white paint. The titanium dioxide is the key word here because when the laser hits it, it turns black or gray, depending on how heavy the intensity of the laser. I have a friend who's done a bunch of tiles with light burn and with various intensities, he does photographs, and they come out amazing. But to get the dead black white on here, after I have etched it, I then remove the paint by putting it in a tin pan, aluminum pan, pouring acetate over it, and shaking the acetate back and forth, rolling it back and forth until the paint lifts. When it lifts, I wipe it with a paper towel and it gets nice and white and clean. Then what I do is I use
Acetone or acetate?
acetone, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
okay.
I'm sorry.
One solid, one's liquid.
Acetate,
There's a
acetone.
Yeah, okay.
At any rate, then what I do is I use alcohol-based ink. You can get them in various colors. And I then drop that into the etched area and wipe it in using a microfiber towel, and fills the whole area in. It evaporates, the alcohol evaporates immediately so the ink sets, and so I can get a nice pure black color. If I'm doing white on black, such as this one, what I do is I just spray paint it with black paint. And then I will probably, depending on the image, I may reverse it and make it a negative, and then burn it so that the area that I want to see comes out white. And that's how I did things like Norfolk Southern. I also do colored ones. And the way I do those is I paint them with tempera paint. Put a couple of good coats of yellow tempera on there. And then I etch the image. And then after it is etched, I use the alcohol inks and I color while the paint is still on. And I cover the areas that I want to be covered. Grab that ship for me, Sandy. And I cover it while the tempera is still on, and after I get everything covered, then I just wash it in the sink. Tempera comes right off, and I've got a beautiful covered tile
In the etched areas.
in the etched areas. And I enjoy doing locomotives, and you can come up and look at all of these things. So that's how I do tiles. And so that's the show. I thank you very much for your time.